So President Yoon's legal troubles are far from over, with the insurrection charges closing in on the South Korean leader. Was his martial law order a pure act of governance or a clear act of insurrection? Let's turn to Professor Lee Hee-eun this afternoon. Good afternoon, Professor Lee.
It's good to be with you.
So let's cut to the chase. What President Yoon is arguing is that his order is not subject to judicial review, like the exercise of diplomatic power. And I have to ask you, can this argument be justified?
Well, it can be to some extent because the issue has been actually raised in the past in Korea that other instances where the Supreme Court and the Constitutional Court have ruled that certain acts of the president are not subject to judicial review because they're wholly political acts. So as President Yoon sort of tried to make his defense of his position, like diplomatic powers or with respect to foreign affairs or the act of pardoning itself is wholly within the executive branch, and the courts cannot touch that kind of decision. So that's the real crux of the issue, is whether the martial law declaration really is in the context of a political act and essentially only reviewable by the legislative branch, which is the National Assembly. And because the National Assembly ruled and made a decision to lift martial law, President Yoon's position has some justification insofar as you view it only as a political act. But that's being debated hotly by constitutional scholars even today. And so that issue is being played out, I think you'll see in the weeks and months ahead.
Indeed. Another significant part of his argument is that a small number of martial law troops were deployed to maintain the order at the parliament. He has been emphasizing that it's not a riot. But what makes such deployment a necessary order in any way? Any legal guidelines?
Yeah, I mean, the point here is the Article 77 of the Constitution, which then provides for the imposition of martial law itself. And the Constitution makes very clear it's in the context of some sort of war, maybe armed conflict, national emergency. And so this is the question, is if the president deemed there to be a national emergency akin to a war or some armed conflict, then deployment of troops to the National Assembly could be justified. But I think that's the question here. Really, people are highly critical of the president because they don't look at the situation as being something akin to an internal conflict,
right,
which an armed conflict. So therefore, that's the issue really it's being raised, whether the troops are absolutely necessary for that purpose.
Well, on top of that, there are testimonies from military officers that President Yoon directly ordered them to drag people out from inside the parliament, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is this has been one of the disturbing kind of accusations, because there has been the accusation, although hotly contested by the presidential office, that no such order was actually given by the president. So that really goes to an evidentiary question as to whether or not that in fact happened. And so that's why we have these investigations ongoing. And that may be a question about whether or not he can be charged with insurrection.
Well, then let's say the vote is passed eventually within the day today, and the case goes to the Constitutional Court. Now, doesn't the Constitutional Court have 180 days to really deliberate and rule on Yoon's political future?
That's right. Normally, you would have, and this is pursuant to Article 38 of the Constitutional Court Act of Korea, that if a case goes to adjudication, in this case impeachment now, the court does have 180 days. But here we have a situation with only 6 justices on the bench. And so that 180 days doesn't actually kick in until you have an actual adjudication. So you would need 7 justices here, and then the time would begin for the 180 days. So at this point, because this is such an unprecedented event, we may see actual delays in the actual proceedings for the impeachment trial.
Right. The process leading up to the verdict could be quite a journey. One, because of how complicated the case is, and 2, because it's not just 1 or 2 people involved in the case.
Absolutely. There's this huge evidentiary issue here. And what the court is going to have to do is then be presented with all the evidence about what actually happened that evening. And then, again, is there a cause for impeachment here? So in this instance, then the question is going to be raised to the court about now introducing evidence. And because so many people were involved, it's going to take a while for this actual impeachment to actually occur.
Professor Lee, before I let you go, is there any way he is not impeached but still faces insurrection charges, or is such a scenario absolutely impossible?
No, you can have that situation because here the impeachment is a political sort of check and balance, whereas the insurrection charge according to the Constitution, is a criminal act. So you can have, you might not have impeachment, but you could have the pursuit of criminal charges of insurrection because the Constitution permits it.
Alrighty, Professor Lee, thank you so much for your time and your insight. We appreciate it.
And thanks for having me.